Let's get hostile. Welcome to the first episode of the podcast, the official podcast of Hostile Environment. My name is Grant. I'm joined by my good friend Robert here, and we've got so much going on in the world of sports. We got NFL free agency. March Madness is around the corner. We got Selection Sunday coming up this weekend. The NBA playoffs, those are coming up too. Maybe just had a finals preview with Celtics Thunder on last night. So we got a bunch to talk about, and we are here to break it down for you. Robert, how are you feeling on this first recording day of the new show?
I feel great. Happy to be here. March Madness is my favorite time of year. My family knows I'm just going to be in a bunker for 4 weeks. They'll never see me, but you know what? They'll be all right.
Yeah, I was having this conversation with one of my buddies earlier, actually on a separate podcast. Funny enough, it's so funny working in sports, as you know. It's like you can't escape from it. We were having a conversation about, is March Madness the best postseason experience? And I voted yes. I said it is because it's so exciting. It goes on for so long. There's so many games on all the time. He said, look, March Madness is great, but it will never amount to the Super Bowl. And that means the NFL playoffs have to be the best. So where do you stand? Is it one of those two? Is it the World Cup? Is it the Olympics?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I would say that the World Cup and the Olympics are like the two bar none greatest sporting events in the world. But, you know, they only happen every 4 years. I mean, I think for March Madness, for me, it's like more entertainment because, you know, obviously just weird stuff happens. And, you know, whoever gets crowned the national champion at the end probably had a fluky path to get there because that's not the point. Like, it's not like the college football playoff where it's like, let's find the 12 best teams. It's like, let's just put a bunch of teams in a bracket, see what happens. And like the NFL is more like football in the sense of, you know, you just want to crown the correct champion in the Super Bowl, and it's more rigid. So I guess it depends on what your goals are. Like, are you trying to watch a high quality product on the field? NFL playoffs. Are you trying to just have your mind blown? March Madness.
So from a betting perspective, because we're both heavily in the world of sports betting, we'll talk about that on these shows. From a betting perspective, do you think it's more fun and is it more profitable in March Madness, or is it NFL playoff stuff like that?
I think it can kind of go either way. I think if you're just kind of blindly throwing cash at March Madness bets, which a lot of people tend to do, you can get burned really quick. But if you really know what you're doing, I think it can be very profitable because there's just so many niche situations, and you know, this guy's been hot lately or this guy's injured, and all these little nuances that I find really fun, and I think I usually do well financially. So
Humble brag. Yeah, it's those sports that have lesser eyes. I'm not saying that college basketball and March Madness aren't popular, but college basketball, there's just so many games, so many players that it's hard to get a bunch of bets on one particular game. So the attention of the sports books is spread out a little bit. Where I'm going with this is I've found that games, events like that, where there's less attention on it, tends to be easier to find holes in the sports books. Like a big one for me was actually at the Olympics. Funny, we were talking about the Olympics. I used to run track. I ran long distance, and I was looking at the betting odds for the men's 1,500 meter. And there was an American named Cole Hocker for plus 2,200. I said, well, this guy has the best sprint finish in the world. He's not the fastest, but at the Olympics in distance races, the top guys usually never run their fastest because they're scared. They're not going to have any gas at the end. And I was like, well, knowing he's not quite the fastest in the world, but he's not that far off. Like, he could hang with them, and he has the best finish, and he had just run this really good time. I was like, it just makes sense that in this style of race, he would come out and acquit himself well, and he won as a plus 2,200 underdog. And I didn't even think that was that big of an upset. So again, those events where less eyes, you don't see him as much. Everybody loves March Madness, but like, are you actually sitting at home grinding Portland State film during your off? I don't think you are.
Yeah. Are they even making the tournament? I don't even know. I think you've got a good point there. And I think it also just comes down to like what the sports books themselves can manage. And like, there's just so much more data available for the NFL. And, you know, and so much more predictable. College basketball, like I said, there's just so much variance, and that's just what makes it so fun. Plus, there's also the aspect of like half of these upsets that happen every year. Like, I'm thinking about like couple years ago when like Yale beat Auburn. Like if they played that game in November, Auburn wins by 40. But it's just something about March that it's just the Yale guys believe that they can do it, and the Auburn guys are scared out of their minds that they're going to choke. And it's just a pressure cooker, and it's awesome.
I mean, that's how we get the Doug Eaterts. That's how we get the Jack Golkes. That's how we get these guys that we will never forget about.
Love it.
So we are going to dive into a full show here, and as we've been teasing a little bit, we are going to talk some March Madness. If we have time, we'll be getting to the NBA as well, but the number one thing we're going to focus on is NFL free agency, and we're going to start that with a topic that is pretty important to Robert as a Steelers fan here. But before we get into that, guys, please hit the subscribe button so you are tuned in. If you're coming from YouTube, then obviously you're here for a reason, but if you're coming from the website, or actually you don't even know about the website, go check us out at thehostileenvironment.com. We got a whole bunch of written content over there as well. But like I said, we're going to be talking about a topic that hits host home for Robert here. And I want to start this off with NFL free agency. I know there are a bunch of big names on the move, maybe not as many as in years past. There is one big name in particular, a big domino, if you will, who seems to be leaning closer to making the trip from the Big Apple just a little bit south down to the Steel City. Aaron Rodgers potentially on his way to the Pittsburgh Steelers. Robert here is a Pittsburgh fan, so I want to start off with him. Do you think it's happening? If it does happen, what do you think of bringing Aaron Rodgers in? And then also, what would you think of the front office's decision to make that happen?
So it's hard to say because a lot of the tea leaves point in that direction, but that's the Aaron Rodgers thing, is that right when you think he's going to do something, he does something different. And I kind of feel that way about the Steelers too. They've always been involved in these sort of like rumors with major players. And like I think about Brandon Ayuk last year, I thought for 3 weeks that Brandon Ayuk was going to be a Steeler, and then it just kept getting delayed, and then it didn't happen. Whereas the big moves they make are like Metcalf. It's just like a thief in the night. Like you didn't even see it coming. So all that's to say, no, I don't think he's going to be a Steeler. I think I've shared my theory with you about, I think he's actually going to be a Viking, and some great reporting by Diana Rossini today, basically saying that the Vikings aren't really sure what they want to do, like if they want to roll the dice with JJ or if they want to, have a little more certainty in Aaron Rodgers, which I don't know how much certainty that is, but I don't know. As someone who had to root for Russell Wilson last year, who is quite literally my least favorite player in the NFL that hasn't committed a crime or inappropriately touched women, I hate him so much. Anything's an upgrade over that. I was sad they didn't keep Fields. I don't even know. They signed Mason Rudolph today. I guess there's a world where like you draft a Jackson Dart or a Tyler Shuck or Will Howard or somebody, and then, you let them do the whole rookie sitting behind the vet, Mason Rudolph. And I mean, Rudolph has proven that he can at least like make you somewhat competitive. Because, I mean, he was pretty solid that last year. He's in Pittsburgh. He's not going to win a Super Bowl, but, I mean, if he's just the bridge between a rookie, to me, that's the ideal scenario.
So I think that's a good place to pick up because I don't disagree with you, but this whole he's the bridge guy, it's like, well, we've had a quarterback in Ben Roethlisberger who overstayed his welcome a bit. And then it's been bridge. Where's the future? And I know we've gone back and forth with some of our friends about, a lot of our friends are starting to say that Mike Tomlin is overrated as a coach because he doesn't win enough games. And you and I have said that, no, he's a good coach because despite his organization failing to get him that franchise quarterback, he's been able to maintain winning football. But at the same time, he's also a bit of a victim of his success because it's like the bottom never falls out, so they can never go and get that top quarterback. So I understand what you're saying, and I agree that Mason Rudolph could be the bridge guy, but I don't have the faith in the Steelers to actually get to the future because they haven't shown me a willingness to do that.
Well, and I mean, to be honest with you, I think it's not just the quarterback. I really want to dive into the front office here because I think that they really, really have kind of failed Tomlin and failed the team a little bit, because if we go back to 2017 first round pick TJ Watt, obviously that is a home run in the greatest extent. 2018, they drafted Terrell Edmonds. Shout out our boy, but that was a reach, and he's now been cut twice. 2019, Devin Bush, awful. 2020, they had no pick.
It surprises me that hasn't worked out, I will say. I thought he was going to be a solid player.
I thought so too, but I think he's just too small. That was always the rub, is he's a great athlete, but just too short. 2020, no pick. 2021, Najee Harris, which it's like, I mean, Najee's okay, but if you're going to get a first-round running back, like he needs to be a game-changing type of player, which Najee is not. 2022, Kenny Pickett. We know how that goes. Shout out the Browns. 2023, Rodgers Jones, offensive tackle, has not lived up to expectations. And then 2024 was Troy Fautanu, who he hasn't played yet because of an injury. So, like, not only are they not drafting quarterbacks well, the top-end talent that you're supposed to get in the first round has just been flop after flop since TJ Watt was drafted. And, like, that's a problem. And the fact that Mike Tomlin, most organizations would have crumbled by this point with that many bad picks in a row. But here we are still, and, like, the Steelers still won 10 games with the ghost of Russell Wilson and a bunch of bad first-round picks. And, like, I mean, just give the man a quarterback, please. Like, I think the Steelers are truly a quarterback away from being a very real contender. And it's just, I think I use the analogy that it's like having a Porsche, but only being able to drive it in a parking lot. Because, like, I see the roster here and, like, the coach, and you're just missing the most important piece, which is quarterback. And, like, can draft a good running back. I mean, there's plenty of options. They just can't figure it out. So maybe that's why. Maybe Rodgers wouldn't be the worst thing. Maybe he has a renaissance. I don't know. But, like, it's just dark.
Yeah, I agree that the Steelers, with the quarterback, obviously, any team with a quarterback's going to be better. I still don't know quite if the roster is where it needs to be, where if, like, they get that guy, they are in Super Bowl contention. I think part of my biggest problem with what they've done these last few years is they have this insistence on being the highest spending team on defense. Mm-hmm. And that's great. There's the saying, defense wins championships, and all that is obviously true. Like, if you watch the Super Bowl, you know the Eagles won with that. But the Eagles also signed Saquon Barkley in free agency. They also traded for A.J. Brown and drafted Devontae Smith and drafted Jalen Hurts. And they have this incredible offensive line. With Pittsburgh, it feels a little archaic in the way that they want to approach things. And especially with the way that the rules have been shifted, there's the rise of coaches that are young offensive guys. Not saying that Tomlin is the wrong guy, but the point is the league is trending in the offensive direction. And it's like the Steelers have planted the flag on, we're going to play defense, and that's it. I mean, they rely on their edge rushers to produce as many touchdowns as their wide receivers, it feels like.
Yeah, no, and that's fair. I see that. I think the only pushback I would have is that, you know, the three highest paid players on the Steelers defense are TJ Watt, Cam Hayward, and Minkah Fitzpatrick. And, like, those guys are perennial Pro Bowl players. I mean, Watt is arguably the best defensive player in the league. And, like, the Steelers, they retire a lot of dudes' numbers. And, like, those are three players who I think the goal is to have their numbers retired one day. And maybe it is, maybe you do need to look and say, hey, maybe we should only pay two of these guys. But to me, I think they're well worth the money. But I guess it's maybe like the going out and spending money on Patrick Queen and, like, Darius Slay and guys like that, where, okay, maybe this is, you know, kind of overspending here when your offensive line is still pretty mediocre.
Yeah, Darius Slay was, like, the most Steelers signing I could have ever imagined.
Yeah. I mean, like, I love it from a football standpoint. Don't get me wrong. Like, him, like, Porter needs a really good second guy to just kind of spell him, and that he's not having to guard every team's number one every single play, every single week, because that's just not Porter. So I like it from a football standpoint, but then here we are with the cheapest offense in the league. So
pivoting off of Pittsburgh, but staying in this realm of quarterbacks, we've seen some quarterback movement. Obviously, we're talking about Aaron Rodgers. He might go to Minnesota because Danny Dimes has decided that he thinks he's better than Anthony Richardson. Sam Darnold is now in the Pacific Northwest. Geno Smith is in the gambling capital of the country. All these guys are on the move. And one thing that I'm not even so much concerned about those moves, because we'll see how they play out. The biggest thing for me there is I want to know what this does for Shedeur Sanders. Because I guess there's a possibility it's Cam Ward, but I'm assuming Cam has gone in the top 3. If you look at some of those teams up there on the draft board, Vegas at 6, they no longer need a quarterback. The Saints at 9 probably aren't going to take one. You run through the list there, there's not a whole bunch of teams. The Jets at 7, they don't need anyone because they just took Justin Fields, or they just got Justin Fields. You run down that list, you got the Bears at 10, Niners at 11, Cowboys at 12. You don't really get to a team that needs a quarterback until Pittsburgh at 20. And if they sign Aaron Rodgers with Mason Rudolph and forget who else, they've got 3 quarterbacks already. Like, I don't think that would happen. So if Shedeur, as weird as it sounds, if Shedeur doesn't go number 3 to the Giants, there's a chance he falls out of the first round.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's well taken. Well, real quick on the Saints, do you know who the last first-round quarterback they drafted was?
Okay, it's obviously not Breeze.
No. I'll give you a hint. They have gone the longest without making a first-round quarterback pick in the entire league.
I was wondering if this was like I was thinking to
There's
myself,
significance to the question, yeah.
I thought it was going to be a trick question. I was like, is this Taysom Hill? I was like, there's no way.
Is it never? Yeah, not never.
I don't know. Who is it?
Archie Manning.
Oh my goodness.
In like 1975.
Yeah, they're not taking a quarterback. They still think they're in their Super Bowl window.
Right. Yeah, right. And Derek Carr, they're paying him so much money. And they got Spencer Rattler. I mean, come on. But with Shedeur, yeah, I think he's going to end up being a Giant. And I think that if he doesn't go 3, I think you're right. He will see a free fall. But I don't know. I think the Giants are going to strike out on pretty much every option, and they're going to be looking at Russell Wilson or Shedeur, and it's like, we have this very, very talented receiver, Malik Neighbors, and like, you can at least make Malik excited if you draft Shedeur, even if Shedeur's not that good. You're at least keeping him happy. Whereas, Russ just pisses off everybody he's in a locker room with. So
it's funny you bring up Russ's name, because for a while I had thought the Giants, I made a mock draft like a month ago. I made one right before the Combine and right after the Combine. Right before the Combine, I had the Giants taking Travis Hunter. And this is when they had no quarterback. And I said, look, they're trading for Matthew Stafford. And of course, Stafford stays in LA, but there are reports that the Giants met the asking price for the Rams and met the asking price for Stafford. And Stafford basically said, I don't want to go to the Giants, which is understandable. So for a while, I thought they were going to go Travis Hunter. I think it makes the most sense organizationally to go Shedeur or Cam, whoever falls now with the situation we're in. But I also know that it's in our nature to value our self-preservation. Brian Dable and Joe Sheen got to know this is it. So if they're looking at their roster, which is pretty bad, I understand they made a couple moves in free agency, but very bad. They're worse than the Cowboys, they're worse than the Commanders, and they're worse than the Eagles. They could easily go 0-6 just in the division. So building off of that, if you bring in Shedeur, that's looking like a 4 or 5 win season. Mm-hmm. If they can try to get Aaron Rodgers, if they can try to get Russell Wilson, even Jameis Winston, I feel like they might try that just to save their own jobs, knowing it's not the best long-term decision, but that gives us the best chance of getting to 8 wins this season, and then I get a contract extension.
Yeah. I forgot Jameis Winston was available, and he is now my number 1 on the Steelers board. Let me just say, F it, DK down there somewhere, right? Yeah, I see what you're saying. I think there's two ways to view it, though, because I think like it comes down to this, I guess maybe the self-awareness of like how many games can we truly win with Aaron Rodgers in a depleted roster or Russell Wilson in a depleted roster. And if the conclusion is like, hey, we're going to still only win 8 games tops, and now we have this aged out quarterback, I think with Shedeur, you can at least say, hey, here's this promising future that we can, if you give us more time to invest in it, we can figure it out. I see both ends of it. It's kind of like Bill Simmons and Ryan Russillo on The Ringer always talk about like how GMs in the NBA who are about to get fired will trade for a bunch of draft picks so they can be like, oh, you got to let me see this through. I got all these draft picks, So I wonder if it would even be the same situation there.
I don't know how I would feel. Well, let me reword that. I don't know how I would be able to look at myself drafting Shedeur over Abdul Carter or Travis Hunter.
Well, that's the crux of the issue, right? The Patriots might end up with one of those two at 4.
Yeah, and going back to what we were talking about, like the Giants. Let's say it goes Carter Ward or Ward Carter. I feel like that's kind of set in stone. Those are going to be the top 2, and then Shedeur goes at 3. Travis Hunter to the Patriots is a slam dunk, and they just traded Jonathan Jones. Obviously, they have Carlton Davis and Christian Gonzalez now, but even still, like, what are you're going to draft Mason Graham? Mason Graham's great, but you have the opportunity to draft a first of his kind player with Travis Hunter.
Yeah, and I think the Patriots would have a lot of flexibility to experiment with him on offense too, because they don't have anybody on offense. Drake May's got to throw it to somebody, and even if it's him only coming in for maybe 20 snaps a game on offense, like let him and Drake May cook a little bit, and that can jumpstart your offense really quickly, I think. So yeah, that'd be ideal for them. Frankly, I don't think either of those quarterbacks are even worth being in the same realm of conversation as Abdul Carter and Travis Hunter. Like, I think both of those guys are going to be perennial all-pro players. And I think Cam Ward and Shedeur, I think they'll both be looking for new jobs within 4 years.
So I don't have the same opinion of Travis, just because I think the floor is a lot lower than Abdul Carter. I get the ceiling. I think Abdul Carter has the highest floor and potentially even the highest ceiling of any player in this class. And I also think Cam is separate from Shedeur. I don't think there's a Shedeur Cam tier. I think there's a Cam, Shedeur, and then probably Dart and Milroe. And Milroe not off of production, but like the physical, the Anthony Richardson physical potential type deal. That's how I look at it.
Yeah, I think I actually personally, I agree. Like, I would actually have Dart over Shedeur personally, just because I think the arm talent is there. It's better arm talent, better athleticism, really all the better traits and better stats too. Like, I think Dart, he had some, he always was good for a couple throws every game, but like, I think like you get him in a lab and you let him, figure that out. Like, the best version of Jackson Dart is like stupid good. Whereas I don't see that for Shedeur.
I'm sorry. I'm with you. I'm with you on the potential for Dart. I do worry about the bottom falling out, but I've been pretty vocal. Obviously, the audience doesn't know this. You know this because we're in the same group chats and everything, but I've been pretty vocal about Shedeur. I don't think I think his best case scenario is being average. I think there are a lot of traits. He holds on the ball way too long. There were a lot of jump ball throws, and I guess you can argue that by saying he trusts his receiver, and his receiver is Travis Hunter. So, like, sure, it's tough to argue that, but there are a lot of passes that would be picked off in the NFL. There's a lot of hero ball for a guy that doesn't have amazing arm talent, and this bugs me more than anything because, like I said at the beginning, I used to run track. He has slow feet, and that's the best way I can describe it. It's like he never did a ladder drill, never did a hurdle drill. When he runs, his feet they hang on the ground. Like, they don't pop off. And I feel like that's why that and his reluctance to get rid of the ball is why he was sacked so much. It wasn't the line's fault. Colorado's line wasn't great, but he played himself into so many sacks. And that's, in the NFL, a sack on third down is basically a turnover.
Yeah, I mean, he looks like he has his feet stuck in the mud. And his arm talent isn't that great either. Like, to me, I think he's Teddy Bridgewater, and like best case scenario, like Jared Goff. I think I might have said at one point, like, best case scenario Lions Goff, worst case scenario Rams Goff or something. I mean, because that's all. Neither of them have great arm strength. Neither moves well. Like, it's all check downs, and if you set them up well and you craft a good offense and give them weapons, like, sure. Like, if you plug Shedeur onto the Vikings, like, I think he'd do great. but they already drafted their quarterback. So
yeah, it's players like Shedeur. Cam's a little more volatile just because he has some hero ball stuff. He can make more stuff happen outside of the pocket. We'll see what happens. We've also seen Cam go from being a 0-star recruit to Incarnate Ward to Washington State to Miami. There's been progression. I'm not saying Shedeur hasn't played well, but he's not followed that linear trajectory that Cam Ward has. So that's also why you hold on to a little more faith with Cam Ward. With Shedeur, you're absolutely right. Like if he goes to, I'm trying to think of teams, and of course everybody's moving their quarterbacks, but like if Trevor Lawrence didn't exist, we know the whole offense would just be fine Brian Thomas Jr., and I don't really see what else would happen. If he went to Tennessee, I don't see anything happening there. But if he goes to the 49ers, he gets with Kyle Shanahan, he goes to the Vikings with Kevin O'Connell, then it's like, oh, I could actually see him being solid there. Mike McDaniel in the Dolphins. I think he's one of those system quarterbacks who, with great players around, with a great head coach, could be serviceable. Although I think one of the examples I made was he's the best case scenario is he's Tua. He doesn't go win the big games by himself. He doesn't have these amazing throws, but he gets rid of the ball quickly. He plays on time and he gets it to his playmakers. And honestly, that's a lot of what he did at Colorado. A lot of it was just, let me find Travis Hunter. Jimmy Ward Jr., I know is not a hot name, but he was a good receiver at the college level. Let me find him.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. I think as far as like those QB needy teams, I don't think the Giants drafting him would be the absolute worst case scenario for him. Like I would be terrified for Shedeur if he was a Titan. But with the Giants, we know that Daboll can run a good offense. Like he did it with Buffalo, he did it at Alabama. Like he
did
just
it with
has
Daniel
to have
Jones.
Right, he did it with Daniel Jones, and like you give him Shedeur and Malik Neighbors, he can make some chicken salad out of you know what there, but it still wouldn't be like that good. They're probably going 7-10 at best, but I don't know. I can see it kind of going either way if he's in New York, and so I guess that's kind of what I hope for him. That's like the best case for him as far as what's actually realistic. So
staying in the NFC East here, the biggest, if you talk football, you got to talk about the Dallas Cowboys. That's where our views are going to come from. That's where the money goes. That's where the stars want to play for the star on the helmet. I wanted to ask this question because the Dallas Cowboys having one of the worst free agencies that I can remember in a while. And I just wanted to ask you, do you think we're getting close to a point where the prestige, and I hate this word, but it unfortunately fits here, the aura of the Dallas Cowboys is finally starting to wear off? Like players have put up with a lot. They've put up with Jerry Jones giving tours of the locker room during practice. They've put up with the comments. They've put up with not getting to a championship game in 30 years because they make more money, because that's where the fans are. But they refuse to pay their guys. They are now going to have to pay a ton of money for Micah Parsons because of the Myles Garrett contract. They could have got that done out of the way. They didn't do that. Same thing that happened with CD and Dak last year. You've seen Micah talk about the inner workings of the locker room and air out some of their dirty laundry. He's been complimentary of Jalen Hurts and Jaden Daniels. CeeDee Lamb just yesterday was on a stream with Neon saying that boy Jaden Daniels is nice. Like these are things you don't want your star players saying about your arch rivals. So I'm just wondering, with the free agency failure, with the direction of the franchise, are we getting to the point where players are not going to want to play for the Cowboys?
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, I think the whole brand thing is a little overstated, I think, in sports when it comes to actually like the players themselves. Because I think you've seen this with the Yankees. Like the Yankees used to be able to get whatever free agent they wanted, and then they had some down years and they were missing out on guys. And even just now, like Juan Soto decided to leave them to go to the Mets. And then same with the Lakers. Like when the Lakers had those dark post-Kobe years, Kevin Durant was the biggest free agency maybe ever. And like, he didn't even consider he didn't even take a meeting with the Lakers, and that summer he signed with the Warriors. And you're talking about comparable brands to the Cowboys, and ultimately it's because the situations weren't good. And so players are not going to be like, oh yeah, I'll go to this 6-10 team because it's the Cowboys and they offer me a lot of money. Well, someone else can offer me that money and I can actually try to win. So I think ultimately, like for the Lakers, what it took was LeBron specifically citing, I want to live in Los Angeles and I want to play for the Lakers. That's such a one-of-one situation that unless Patrick Mahomes is like, you know what, I really want to go back to Texas, it's just not going to happen. They just need to start building organically like any other franchise.
Did you know, actually I might have sent you this stat, but I saw that the Cowboys have not paid a free agent that wasn't one of their draft picks more than $10 million per year since 2015.
Wow. That is crazy.
So looking at some of their moves in this free agency period, they re-signed Osa Odigizua to, I believe, 4 for $80 or something in that neighborhood. Good player, but it's a lot of money. They signed Solomon Thomas, who's 30, 31, was released by the Jets. They re-signed Kevontae Turpin. Their big money move is a 1-year deal for $3.5 million for Javonte Williams, a good pass catching third down back, I guess. They signed Robert Jones. They signed Marquise Bell, Peyton Turner, Trent Sieg. They traded for Kyer Elam, who was one of the lowest graded corners on Pro Football Focus's rankings last year. They signed Jack Sanborn. They trade for Kenneth Murray Jr. and CJ Goodwin. Like, if you don't recognize most of the names I just read, I don't blame you. It's my job to follow football for a living, and these are guys that you never talk about. Like, I know who they are, but they don't move the needle at all. They didn't move the needle for the teams they were on before. They're not going to move the needle for a Dallas team that just had its worst year in however long, and a Dallas team that is way behind the Eagles, and now we can say way behind the Commanders.
Yeah, I don't know if you saw the tweet the other day where it said, if anyone is referred to as a, quote, former first rounder, you know they are absolute turbo dog shit.
Yeah.
And I've seen like 3 different Cowboys signings with that label on them. So yeah, I mean, that just tells you what they're doing. They're doing nothing. Like if I was a Cowboys fan, I'd be pissed. Like I have one of the most talented receivers in the league in CeeDee Lamb and, you know, signed a franchise quarterback, love him or hate him, like, and Micah Parsons, like, but you're just squandering it. I think I said that, you know, Jerry Jones runs his team like he's John Dutton running Dutton Ranch, if you've seen Yellowstone, and I don't know where he is. Like, I don't know what he's doing. It feels like, you know, maybe it's that scene where he's like helping a mom and a baby change their tire, and then a minivan stops and opens fire on him, and he's like in the hospital, you know? I don't know where he is.
Yeah, Jerry Jones, it's getting to that point where someone's got to step in. I know Stephen Jones, obviously, is there a Jerry Jr.? His daughters are involved. Somebody's got to go talk to him at this point. Like, his radio show is not helping. His comments after games are not helping. And he's so insistent that he is all in to win a Super Bowl. And I believe he believes he is. I believe he thinks he wants nothing more in this world than to win a Super Bowl. And he wants to guide his team there. But someone's got to come to him and say, if you are as serious as you claim to be about wanting to win a Super Bowl, then you need to go hire somebody to be the general manager. You need to hire somebody to make these decisions. It's like with the Eagles. I wish I could remember what happened, but Howie Roseman worked for the Eagles, and he told Jeffrey Lurie he wanted to do something. I think it might have been draft a player. It might have been Jalen Reagor, actually. It might have been he wanted Justin Jefferson, and Jeffrey Lurie said, we're taking Jalen Reagor. I could be wrong on that. Anyway, that happened.
That did happen. The pick happened regardless.
The pick did happen, yeah. I'm just trying to remember if that was the specific situation I'm talking about. Yeah. Howie Roseman leaves the Eagles. Jeffrey Lurie goes back to him and says, I messed up. I will never step on your toes again. I need you here to get us back to the promised land. Howie Roseman comes back. They get to 2 Super Bowls in 3 years, and now they're the best positioned team in the NFL because of how much success they've had in the draft. And also, I don't know if you've seen this, because of all the guys they had that were signed as free agents, they now got a bunch of compensatory picks. They now have 20 picks over the next 2 drafts, and they're probably going to get more because they can trade back off of players, or if more guys get signed next year, they're going to get compensatory picks for them.
Yep. Yep. And it honestly reminds me, I think quietly the same thing is happening with the Panthers, and no one really talks about it because David Tepper was, possibly still is, one of the worst owners in sports. And a lot of that was because he wanted to be so involved with the decision making, and he wanted his wife to be involved with the decision making. And it's like, and it was so horrendously bad that he kind of realized, like, okay, I need to delegate responsibility here. And if you look at what the Panthers have done, since their regime change, I guess it would have been last offseason, like, they've made some really good moves. The Panthers are quietly signing a really solid free agency class, compared to what you can get in Charlotte, and made some good picks. They're developing Bryce Young well. Chuba Hubbard came on. Like, ultimately, owners are good at running businesses. They're not elite football minds. And, like, you have to learn as a business owner to delegate your responsibility to the people who are experts at it, because you don't know everything.
I will also say, I don't think the Brian Burns trade was the worst thing in the world either.
Yeah, I think it was done too late. And I would say that about McCaffrey and Burns, because they didn't even get a first-round pick for McCaffrey. Yeah. And then Burns, they were able to salvage some. But I feel like I remember hearing at one point they were offered 3 firsts for him and didn't take it. And then at, like, the trade deadline, and then they traded in that offseason, and he got a much smaller return because he was going into the last year of his contract. So,
well, speaking of the Panthers, I guess we can transition to a question I wanted to ask. We're going to start with the positives. I want to talk about some of the biggest winners in free agency. I'll kick it off since it's my question. I'll give you some time to think here. I wanted to give an honorable mention to the Chicago Bears, and I feel like that's pretty obvious. Trading for Jonah Jackson, trading for Joe Thuney. So I guess not really free agency winning, but just these last couple of weeks.
Yeah.
They make those trades. They get Drew Dahlman to play center, Grady Jarrett after he's released by the Falcons. I don't think it was incredible, but I like that they're trying to go after the identity of their new coach. And granted, we don't quite know what Ben Johnson's head coaching identity is, but we know that he comes from the Detroit Lions, and we know what they did. They beefed up their trenches, and they said, we're going to control the point of attack, and we're going to build everything based off of that. And I feel like that's what the Bears are trying to do here. I feel like some of their offensive line concerns were a little overstated. Like, if you look at their pass block win rate, their pressure percentages, they're actually about league average. Caleb kind of played himself into sacks, but even still, if you go from league average to, better than average, then that's a success. So I like them. I got 3 teams that I want to put up there as my biggest winners of free agency. And this is in no particular order. One of them, I want to go with the Seattle Seahawks. I don't love Darnold for Geno. Like, I don't view that as a huge upgrade, but Marquez Valdez-Scantling, as far as just value signings go, I think that was great, because if you actually paid attention to Saints games, and I know not many people watch the Saints, but he was one of the best deep ball receivers in the NFL last year. You get him for a pretty cheap deal. I feel like it's just smart business. That's not a franchise-changing move, but it's value. That's what free agency is about. And then the big one for me is DeMarcus Lawrence. Their head coach, Mike McDonald, this goes back to building in somebody's image. DeMarcus Lawrence has been arguably the best run defender on the edge in the NFL over the last however many years. So the fact you get him, he's 32, but he's still playing well. You get him for a 3-year deal. I like that for Mike McDonald. Denver Broncos, Dre Greenlaw, I understand the risk there coming off a torn Achilles. When he was healthy, he was clearly a top 10 linebacker in the league.
He's so good, man.
Yeah, he doesn't need to come in and be elite, because Denver had a top 3 defense last year. And you want to know, if you can't go get an elite running back or an elite wide receiver to help your rookie quarterback, then why not go build the best defense in the NFL? You already, again, I think they were 3rd, 4th in points allowed per game. Let's go get Hufanga to play safety. That's a guy with all-pro potential. He's going to be really good for them. And then Evan Ingram, he was a bust with the Giants, but he actually has been pretty resurgent with the Jags. Good vertical threat, and he had safer hands last year than I can ever remember him having in his career. So I think that's good for Bo Nix. And then I'm going to put the Buffalo Bills there, just because Joey Bosa, Larry Ogunjobi, the Bills' biggest issue is, as good as their defenses have been, they've been small up front, and they haven't won the big plays in the playoffs. Those are 2 guys that are going to help them do that.
Yeah, no, I think that's good. I would put the I would put, like I said, the Panthers in there. I think the Vikings still. Especially that interior defensive line, getting Javon Hargrave and Jonathan Allen, like those dudes are going to be getting after it. And then I would also still go to the Bears. I think they're worth more than an honorable mention because yes, they kind of rebuilt that offensive line, but like you look at what else they did. They they brought in Grady Jarrett. They added an edge rusher too, Odiingbo. Like they're addressing their weaknesses and they're giving it their all to try to find it. And their weaknesses last year were both interiors. And I mean, that's kind of what you got to do. Like you have your quarterback, you have like good weapons around him. I still see the Bears probably going running back. I actually think that they're going to be where Ashton Genty ends up. So I think that they have a lot of possibilities here. And, who knows? It's the Bears and something always happens. They get Bearsy, but I think that they've got the makings for a pretty solid team. I don't know if I'm drinking the Kool-Aid again as an idiot for the second year in a row, but I don't know. Makes sense.
No, if they get Ashton Genty, that team goes through the roof. And I put out a mock draft on thehostilenvironment.com. Go check it out if you want to see it. I did have the Bears taking Ashton Genty at 10. And in my mock draft before the combine, which obviously is a little outdated, but I had them taking, goodness gracious, Tyler Warren. And I understand that wasn't a super popular pick at the time, but kind of what I mentioned earlier, like the offensive line wasn't terrible. It was a little bit about average, maybe a little bit worse. But even now with those offensive upgrades, it would be nice to get that running back. But someone as versatile as a Tyler Warren, who might be the best run after catch guy of any position in this draft, I feel like also Ben Johnson likes multiplicity. He likes different options. He likes different avenues of attack, and that's a guy who would do that for you. But I'm with you. I think Genty, if he's on the board, is the most attractive pick.
Yeah, and that is interesting, the whole run after catch point, because if you think about their current receiving core, aside from Keenan Allen is so old now that he's just going to catch it and fall down. But DJ Moore's specialty is when he gets the ball, he's like a running back. And Odunze's fast as lightning. Like and then you add in Swift and potentially Genty, like, yeah, that offense can go. I don't know how much playing time Swift will get, considering Ben Johnson appears to hate that guy's guts as a football coach goes, but I don't know. If I had to predict today, I think the Bears are a playoff team.
I picked the Bears, so I had two futures bets in the divisions last year. I had the Bears to win the NFC North, and at 4-2 with a rookie quarterback, I was like, oh man, it's only going up from here. And then they finished with 5 wins. Actually, it might have been 5-2, not 4-2. And then the other one was the Rams, and they start 1-4, and they win the division. It's funny how futures bets go sometimes.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, and I'm trying to think. I really agree with your Broncos point as well. I think that's another team that's just quietly putting it all together, and they do need to figure out their run game because letting Javonte walk, like that was, I don't think he's never been the same since he had his knee injury was like pretty significant. It was like the same as J.K. Dobbins, where the burst just probably will never be the same. But yeah, they have to get somebody. So I don't know if they're an Amari Hampton spot, if they are a Caleb Johnson spot in the second round, or Travion Henderson. Travion Henderson feels like a Sean Payton guy, Yep. So if they can figure that position out, I think they're golden.
So I had them taking Colston Loveland. Obviously, that's not a necessity anymore, but it's nice to see that I'm tapped in with the Broncos front office. They're like, we need a tight end guy, someone who's going to work the underneath, but also can get vertical sometimes, and they end up going there. Switching over to the biggest losers of free agency. I mean, we did a whole topic on one, but the Dallas Cowboys. I don't really see a way around it. Jerry Jones, last year it was we're all in. This year it was selectively aggressive. You could argue their biggest moves weren't even free agency signings. They were trades, and it's for guys who underperformed. I don't see the direction. I don't see the ambition. I don't see the desire. The Eagles, maybe they get worse, but you know what? They just won the Super Bowl, so like, who really cares? And how much worse is worse? Like, they're still a 12-win team. The Commanders, I'm a Commanders fan. I know people don't know that. I'm a Commanders fan. I'm expecting them to take a step back just because that's what happens when you overachieve so greatly. But same thing. It's a step back from 12 wins. Like, they go down to 10. They're still better than the Cowboys. The Cowboys have completed the difficult task of finding the franchise quarterback. They have the franchise edge rusher. They have the franchise playmaker. They got all of that. This is the easy part. Just go fill out the roster, and they haven't been able to do it.
Yeah, I think the only one I would add would be the Bengals.
Good one.
I think, you franchise tag T. Higgins for the second year in a row. Like, at some point, you got to get that extension done, because the thing about continuing to tag a player is you're going to have to keep paying him more the more you tag him. And so then that means he's going to want more per year when you sign him to an extension. So you're just it's like what the Commanders did with Kirk Cousins, right? Where they just kept delaying the inevitable. So really would have loved to see them get an extension there, or for Burrow, or for Chase. Instead, they signed Mike Gesicki to a 3-year extension for $25.5 million, which is way too much. And they're going to lose Trey Hendrickson probably, because he's going to get traded or requested a trade. Sam Hubbard retired. Like, the only strength of that defense last year was their defensive line, and that defensive line's going to suck now. They bring back BJ Hill, who's solid, but I don't know. I think that they're in trouble, really in trouble. They've only truly signed 2 free agents, which are TJ Slayton and Oren Burks. That defense was already awful last year. Joe Burrow's going to have to throw the ball 60 times a game just to keep him in the game. So, not that I am sad to see them fail, because I am a Steelers fan and it's nice seeing them suck again, but
So it's only fair if I'm going to make fun of the Cowboys. I got to put my own team in the fire. As I said, I'm a Commanders fan, and I'm adding the Commanders to the worst free agency period. If it weren't for the trades, which again, not actually free agent signings, this might be worse than the Cowboys to me. So they make the Laramie Tunsil trade, they make the Deebo Samuel trade. We're going to put those off to the side for now. They're free agent signings. They re-signed Jeremy McNichols, Bobby Wagner, Zach Ertz, John Bates, Tressway, Marcus Mariota, and that's it. The new guys they've signed, you get Will Harris, who's a hard hitter, not a great coverage guy, going to one of the worst defenses in the NFL. Jonathan Jones, coming off of his worst year as a pro. Eddie Goldman, who basically didn't register any stats last year. Dietrich Wise, 5 sacks, I guess, but that's the most I can remember him ever having. Matter of fact, let me go. So that was the second most sacks of his career. And if you look at it's either 16 or 18, I forget. The 16 or 18 guys they either signed or re-signed or traded for, their average age is 30. And they're going to be half a year older by the time the season starts. And I'm all for maximizing your rookie quarterback's window. That's your Super Bowl window. That's your time to strike. Unless you've got someone who is MVP level every year. Lamar, Mahomes. I guess we got to put Hurts in that conversation. Burrow, those guys can survive outside of the rookie window. I'm all for trying to maximize that. But I think the Commanders are falling into the trap of believing they're closer than they are, because they can look back at last year and say, we were 1 win away from the Super Bowl. We just need 1 or 2 more guys. That's not true. If you play that season back 100 times, they probably don't make it to the NFC Championship game in 98 of them. Jaden Daniels worked so many miracles, and he was just so good. He elevated the players around him so high that he could overlook a terrible defense. I know the stats are okay in some areas. If you watch them, the Commanders could not cover, they couldn't complete a tackle, and they couldn't stop the run. And the running back game is awful. They basically, whenever they played the Eagles, they didn't even try to run the ball if it wasn't Jaden Daniels, because they knew they couldn't. The offensive line was only serviceable because they exclusively ran no huddle. And aside from Terry McLaurin, you didn't have any playmakers outside. So I think they are, again, I think they're falling for the trap, thinking they're closer than they are.
Yeah, I actually think that is the Bengals trap in a way, because I think comparing the Commanders last season making the AFC Championship game, to me, that's very comparable to when the Bengals made the Super Bowl, because basically Burrow and Higgins and Chase elevated that team beyond what their capabilities should have been. And I think the Bengals just kind of put the car in neutral and were like, oh, we got this awesome group of guys right here. Like, we should be fine. Otherwise, we can just kind of piecemeal it. And then, you look what happened 2 years later, they're out of the playoffs, 2 years in a row. So I hope that the Commanders don't go down that path, for your sake and for the sake of, I just really love Jaden Daniels. But, it'll be interesting to see how it plays out this year. I hated the Debo trade. I'm just going to say it. Like, I know that the price that you got him for was like basically nothing as a 5th round pick, but like, there's a reason for that. And it's that Debo is kind of cooked. And to be honest, he had like one amazing year, but ever since McCaffrey has come into the fold and Debo's not like, that running back wide receiver hybrid anymore, his production has gone off significantly, not just in the run game, but in the pass game too. I don't know. I get the theory and you need a good wide receiver too, but I just don't think it's going to work out the way that fans hope it will.
The only way I see it working out in a positive, I think Debo is better than Olamide Zaccheaus and Noah Brown and guys like that. So if that's your definition of working out, then okay, the trade's probably going to work out, but work out in the way we want. Like, get back to the NFC Championship game, make this team better than 12-5. The only way that happens, in my opinion, is if they get Amari and Hampton or at the end of the first round, which honestly I don't think they would do. I think they would look at more high-value positions there. Or if you can get a Travion Henderson, a Caleb Johnson, those would be the guys for me. You could also look at Basil Tootin, Dylan Sampson, Quinshon Judkins. Like, you need a real home run threat running back to open up this offense. That's what I'm looking for. Washington last year, it's going to sound crazy because Jaden had so many highlights. They were 30th in explosive plays.
Wow.
He was working miracles on his own. He needs playmakers around him.
Well, a lot of those like magical plays from Jaden wouldn't even qualify as explosive because it was basically him just like staying alive in the pocket and making some crazy throw to Zach Ertz 8 yards away to get a first down. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So that makes sense. I think I kind of love the idea of Judkins on the Commanders. I feel like if you put him and Brian Robinson together, they're like similar in their running style. They're both like run through an MFer's face kind of style, but they're just very different builds and skill sets. So if Judkins was basically the smaller explosive version of B-Rob, that wouldn't be the worst thing for a run game. And then I think the Commanders should still take a wide receiver at the end of the first round if there's a good one available. If you can get Matthew Golden, I think you got to do it.
So I'm going to ask you about Golden because I was unsure. I remember the first time I saw a mock draft that had Golden going to the Commanders. I was like, Matthew Golden, really? And I hate that sometimes I don't trust my gut. Like when the Commanders trade for Laramie Tunsil, I was like, oh, that's awesome. But then I looked into it more and more, and I thought about the whole situation. I was like, actually, I don't really know if I love this. With Golden, it's the opposite. I saw that. I was like, what? But now the more I look at it, it's like, well, you think about it. He transferred in from Houston. Yep. Isaiah Bond came from Alabama. Bond was supposed to be the guy. By the end of the year, Golden was clearly the guy. 100-plus yards in his final 2 games. Runs the 4.29? Or was he? Yeah. It's like, I don't know. I don't quite know how to feel about Matthew Golden.
I think he's incredibly talented. And for me, I understand why he made the move to Texas, because ultimately, like, you want to compete for a championship and you want to get a bag. And like, he was able to do both of those things, but it was not a good fit in terms of, Sark likes to spread the ball around a lot in his offense, and Quinn Ewers is not a deep ball guy. And when you have that kind of breakaway speed, like, you need somebody who can air it out to you. That was not Quinn Ewers. That is Jaden Daniels, though.
Jaden might. I want to give respect to Josh Allen and Mahomes. Jaden's in the conversation for best deep ball thrower in the NFL.
Yeah, I would put the edge to Allen and Mahomes still, because they can make that like stupid deep throw, because like Daniels doesn't have that like god tier arm strength. He's just pinpoint accurate from absurd distances. But still, I mean, yeah, he's up there top 3 or 4, like, and Lamar's probably in that conversation too. Like, but that fits Golden well, and I think that allows Terry more. That just gives Terry more space. And Terry's been used to being double teamed his whole NFL career, and he finally has someone who can actually thread a needle. But I would just love to see somebody like Terry actually just be like, oh my God, there's only one guy here. This is so great. What do? I can just get open all I want. So yeah, I think that'd be a home run pick if he's there.
Yeah, if the Commanders don't take a running back or a wide receiver they can trade around, they can do whatever they want. If they don't get a wide receiver or a running back in the first 2 rounds, I think it's a pretty big failure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would agree with that. I think the only concern maybe with Golden and really with a lot of the receivers is the receiving core would still be pretty small. Because Terry's not huge. He's pretty average size. I mean, Zacchaeus is very small. Debo, I mean, he's bigger, but he kind of plays small.
Yeah. He's not a jump ball guy.
No, and Golden's only 5'11". And a lot of the wide receivers that are available, like Luther Burden, I don't think would be a good fit. Trying to think of some others that could be maybe in the second round.
Would be great, but he's not falling.
Yeah. I think if you're going to go second round, I like Ayumanor from Stanford. I think that's a guy that he's kind of the opposite of Debo, where he plays bigger than he is. He's like maybe 6'2", but has the posture and the playing style as if he thinks he's Megatron. And I just love that. And he's just a diamond in the rough because he had to play at Stanford. But that dude's a dog, and I think whoever gets him is going to be very happy.
So my second, maybe third, although probably second round receiver choice would be Jalen Higgins from Iowa State.
Yep.
6'4", ran a 4.47, 39-inch vertical leap. I believe back-to-back 1,000-yard seasons. He would be the deep ball. He would be the jump ball, the strong guy. He would be, I don't even know who to equate him to. You're Mike Evans, I guess.
He's like, honestly, to me, he's like 90% of Brian Thomas.
There you go.
Like, because he's the big, fast guy. I don't think he's quite as explosive as Thomas. Thomas is a freak, but I mean, I like that too. He's almost, and this is low-hanging fruit because of the last name, but he's almost like a faster T. Higgins.
Yeah. So I know I said we were going to talk NBA. We're running out of time, so we'll probably move off of that. But we do have Selection Sunday coming up pretty soon here, so let's get some quick March Madness, maybe 5-10 minutes of March Madness here.
Sure.
I know this is a big transition, but I want to go big picture first, and then we'll talk about sleeper teams that you're looking at. But big picture is Duke. Duke is the betting favorite according to the sports books. Is that right? Do you think they have the highest floor, and do you think it's reasonable to expect them to win the championship?
I don't think they have the highest floor, but I do think they have the highest ceiling by a long shot. I think that, Cooper's unbelievable, but Tyrese Proctor has been amazing. If he gets an open look, it's going in. And he's been doing well creating off the dribble. Kneppel's good. Like they have a lot of good players. Even like Caleb Foster got minutes for the first time in like weeks, and he looked awesome. Duke is who I would pick to win it all right now, for sure.
Sorry, muted myself. There's some noise going on outside. Don't want it to carry over. If not Duke, who are some other teams that are up there? Like Duke has a day where they miss some threes or somebody gets injured. Hopefully not. But my point is, like, if not Duke, who do you think is next in line there?
I actually think Michigan State. I think that the way that they're playing, they are quietly, maybe besides St. John's, the hottest team in America. They've got some dudes. They've got Jace Richardson, which is just fun to watch him ball out there. And Izzo, he's known as Mr. March, right? And whether that title's deserved or not, I don't know. But this is the best team he's had in a really long time.
So I'm really happy you mentioned them, because I don't know if they classify it as a dark horse. Like, they're probably going to be a 2 seed.
Yeah, they'll be a 2 seed.
Yeah, but just with the recent history of Michigan State, we're almost at that point where it's like, Izzo has a championship. It's like, why don't you prove it again? Because we haven't seen something from you in a while. I'm with you. I think Michigan State is a great pick here. You look at some of their recent results. They've beaten Purdue, Michigan twice, Maryland, Wisconsin. I know that we don't always give a lot of love to the Big Ten, but these are quality teams that they've beaten.
They're beating the hell out of them, too.
Yeah, that's the thing. That last one against Michigan, they smoked them.
They dropped 50 in the first half, and then they just, like, checked out the whole second half because it was like, you're not coming back.
Yeah, the thing that I guess concerns me is they can't shoot, right? This is a team that shoots 30% from three, and that is going to matter at some point. I think they could still survive one of those types of games because they're so good on the glass. This is, I think, the most overlooked stat in playoff basketball, college or professional, is defensive rebounding. I don't think people realize how important it is to close a possession with one shot, especially in close games, and Michigan State does that.
Well, yeah, and I mean, statistically speaking, right, like if that's what's happening, if you're only letting the opponent get one shot per possession, that shot is more likely than not going to be a miss, you know, because each team on average, I mean, I'd have to look it up, but I would imagine it's probably on average between 40 and 45% from the field. So, yeah, I mean, that's why I like St. John's, too, is, I mean, they are tenacious on the glass and great defenders, too. But that's another team that shoots sub 30% from the three-point line. So I have always been a guards win championships kind of guy, but I'm almost having to like walk back that philosophy a little bit because of just how good some of these teams are defensively.
So I have Michigan State. I have more trust in Michigan State just because they're more dynamic offensively than St. John's is. I think St. John's, I don't know if it would be fair to call it an upset, but I think they're getting knocked out. I don't see a Final Four run for them.
Yeah, I think that they are a team where I think that to me, they're a high floor, low ceiling. And I think, I don't know, it's hard because they do defend so well. But if they get one of those mid-major teams that shoots like 40% from three, and, you know, those kids just start burying a couple tough shots early, like, I think it could get real spooky.
Well, so speaking of a team that shoots 40% from three, I want to talk about Houston here because it's been easy to ignore Houston in years past, and they've kind of buried their own grave, dug their own grave, because it's like, oh, look at this team. They have such a great regular season. They don't play anybody. They come to the tournament, they don't get it done. And that happened year after year after year. Well, now they're actually in a legit conference. They went 19-1 in the regular season in that conference, and they are no longer a team that plays excellent defense. No, they're an excellent team that defends the hell out of the basketball. They're the fourth-ranked team in the country in three-point percentage. They shoot 39.7%. So if you can defend at that level, we know their activity on the glass, and you can shoot like that, you've got a ton of different ways to win games. And that, to me, is what's so different about this team compared to the one in years past.
Yeah, I said Duke has the highest ceiling. I think Houston has the highest floor. I think that barring like a really, really crappy draw, I think they're an Elite Eight team at minimum. They're just simply that much better. So I think, I don't know, it would depend on how the draw is right now. I'd be really interested in a St. John's Houston matchup because it's almost like Houston is St. John's if St. John's could shoot. But St. John's also a little better defensively, so that would be a really intriguing matchup for me.
So I could be wrong here. I actually want to pull this up because I feel like they might be in the same bracket of the latest
in Lunardi.
Same region. Sorry,
that's part of what made that matchup pop into my head was I was looking at it yesterday and I was like, ooh, that'd be fun.
Yeah. So the top four seeds over there, really the top three are what's interesting. You would have Houston as the one. This is in the Midwest. You'd have Houston as the one, Alabama as the two, and St. John's as the three. And those are three teams that are so different, but would have such fun games together. I would be cool with seeing either two of those three.
I'm going to tell you this. I don't think Nate Oates wants to see St. John's because, I mean, and Alabama they always have the shooters and the athletes, and Mark Sears is one of my favorite players in the country because that dude is fearless and he can make it from anywhere. But at the same time, Nate Oates' offense is pretty simplistic. And it works well in college because, like if you look at Virginia Tech right now with Mike Young, it's like they're running these concepts and the players just have no idea what to do with it because they just cannot fathom how to run an offense. And all Alabama is just driving and kicking. That's what they do over and over and over, and it works.
However, offensively, they are a dumbed down version of the Thunder.
Yes, or it's like equivalent to like Tennessee football in their offense, where everyone's like, "This is the most gimmicky offense ever," because it's just running and play action,
spread them wide.
Balls. Yeah, but I think that St. John's would be a terrible matchup for them because I think Rick Pitino would coach Nate Oates into a pretzel. Because Pitino has been around so much basketball and he's got his team playing such tough defense that I think he would suffocate Alabama and really make them start to panic.
One of my friends also made a point the other day that Rick Pitino has taken a team that shot worse than 30% from three to the Final Four before. He did it with Louisville.
Yep. Although according to the sanctions, that did not happen.
Of course. We just got to erase that. It's like the NBA play-in tournament. Those games just don't exist. They're not real statistics.
Yeah, poor Kevin Ware shattered his shin for no reason.
I remember watching the tournament like a year or two later, and he was at like Georgia Southern or something like that.
Yeah.
I was like, there's no way this guy's even playing basketball at all.
No, it was a very I remember the coverage was a very DeMar Hamlin-esque. Look at this guy. Let's give comeback player of the year to Joe Flacco.
So, upset teams. We've talked about teams that could make a run that maybe aren't one seeds, but like actual upset teams. I wanna float this by you. First of all, I think the SEC is the best basketball conference. I don't think the gap is as wide as it's made out to be, but I do think it is the best. And I'm gonna take an SEC team as my actual upset team, and it's not going to be Kentucky or some other team you'll be expecting. I genuinely think the Georgia Bulldogs have a chance to make some noise here. And I can run you through some of my reasoning why. So the Georgia basketball team finds itself that like the Ole Miss football team, the Mizzou football team has found itself in for years, where it's like they lose 4 or 5 games, but they can credibly go around to other teams throughout the country and say, no, we're better than you. Our record wasn't better, but we just played such a difficult schedule that we're not even playing the same game at this point. So if you look at Georgia's results, they've lost to most of the ranked teams they've played. However, they did beat Kentucky when Kentucky was ranked 6th. They did beat Oklahoma when they were 17th. They've played Mississippi State to a 1-point game. They just beat Florida very recently, beat Vanderbilt, who's a credible team. This is a team, they beat St. John's earlier in the year, don't forget that as well. And they also went on a run, forget exactly where they finished, but they did go on a run in the NIT tournament last year. So I know just from watching them, and then also my girlfriend and her whole family are Georgia alumni, they're pretty plugged in down there. They've told me that like for the last few years, ever since they hired this new coach, more money's been going in. They've redone their basketball, their athletic center. They're getting more and more out of that program, and I think Georgia's going to be a program on the rise for the next few years.
Yeah, I mean, that Mike White hire was huge. I mean, they pulled Florida's head coach away. Like, that's insane. That'd be like Michigan hiring Ryan Day. Like, it's crazy. I see what you're saying. I think Georgia is just, I think their ceiling is high and their floor is very low. Like even you saw last night, they lost to an Oklahoma team in the SEC tournament that they should not have lost to, and had a very winnable game. But the talent is there. I think they're one of those teams where like they're either going to lose in the first round or they're going to like make the Elite Eight. Like it's if they win one, like count on them winning a couple more. So I don't hate that. I think my team that I'm like, if they get a good draw, I think they're a Final Four team. And to me, that's Louisville. I am a huge Pat Kelsey guy. I think he is one of the most brilliant coaches. He's energetic. He gets the most out of his team. He runs just an electric offense. Those Louisville guys can shoot the lights out. He took Chucky Hepburn, who at Wisconsin was kind of flaming out, and turned him into a first-team All-ACC point guard. Chucky's been awesome. They have great shooters. He brought over He brought over a couple good guys from Charleston, and this is an offense that could light it up and score 85 to 90 any night on anybody. And they're the type of team where, and I think we'll see, it depends on what they do in the ACC tournament as well, and they play tonight. If they make a little run in the ACC tournament, start to feel kind of hot, I wouldn't want to play them.
Yeah, I was just looking at their recent results. They've won 19 of their last 20 games.
Correct.
And think about where Louisville was just the last couple of years. That's a remarkable turnaround.
Yep, and again, it's testament to Pat Kelsey. He won ACC Coach of the Year for a reason. He flipped the entire roster and put out their third in the ACC, probably a top 8 seed. So I think it's amazing.
And I think that's actually a pretty good place to stop here for this first episode. Wish we get to the NBA, but on the next episode, we're going to have more NFL updates. The bracket might be out by the time we record again. We're going to be having a lot of stuff to cover. So obviously, like I said earlier, please hit the subscribe button, hit the like button as well. And if you want to check out what Robert and I are up to on the day-to-day, go to thehostileenvironment.com. You'll get some more written content over there. We're going to have some links coming to the website. You can follow us on Twitter, stuff like that. Make sure you're tuned in. Yes, I'm still calling it Twitter. I will never call it X. It's always going to be Twitter. But we appreciate everybody tuning in for this episode. And until next time, we will catch you guys later. Have a great day.